Okay, time for a serious question. Was it only me who thought it was really weird when we were introduced to 17 sickles to a galleon and 29 nuts to a sickle that those numbers are prime numbers and therefore not divisible into any smaller currency? Was it just me? Welcome, fellow world builder, to another episode of Just in Time Worlds. Today, I want to talk about currency and money and how to build a good monetary system in a fantasy world. How I'm going to break this concept down is I'm first going to discuss money as a concept, then I'm going to discuss symbolism in money, and finally, I'm going to give you 5 guiding questions for building your own monetary currency based system in a fantasy world. Before we get going, please do hit the subscribe button. It really does help the channel grow to have more subscribers. Okay, let's get cracking. I did a history of money short, which you can check out over there, where I discussed how money's developed in our world over the millennia. The key takeaway that you should get from this short is 2 things. One, it is important to have divisible money into higher and lower denominations. And 2, money is about trust. So let's explore those 2 things. First, we moved away from using things like whale teeth, seashells, and so on as currency because it's hard to divide those things into halves and quarters and 1/10ths and etc. etc. And then it becomes hard to trade in anything other than big values. And that's why, like my example at the top of the currency used in the Harry Potter world invented by J.K. Rowling's of galleons and sickles and nuts, why it was weird to me that the numbers that make up those bigger denominations are prime numbers. Now, I think it was meant as sort of a satirical joke of the weirdness of some of the monetary coins that have been used over the centuries by the British colonial system with 3 pennies and half pennies and all kinds of weird denominations. But when you're designing your currency system, your denominations, it's worth thinking about how those denominations are divided upwards and downwards. The second important concept about money is that you have to understand money is more about trust than it is about the value, the intrinsic value of money. And this holds true even for coins. If you look at the history of our own world, they find more English coins in Scandinavia than they find in England, like old English coins. And the reason for that is because the Vikings raided England, they took those coins, and then they spent them in their own society. And that's because they trusted that they would be able to spend those coins. What money represents is a value of a good or service that you believe you will be able to purchase in the future. Right? That's what money actually is, which is fascinating. So to have a functioning monetary system, to have a functioning currency, you need to have an issuing authority that is trusted by your society. And it doesn't have to be your government, as the Viking example shows. Kosovo and Montenegro both use the euro, but they're not in the Eurozone. They don't have an agreement with the Eurozone to use the euro. They just use the euro because they trust the issuing authority of the Central European Bank. In a fantasy context, an author who did this really well is David Gemmell. In his books around John Chenal, he has Bartok coins, which are coins that are minted somewhere in his post-apocalyptic world. Now, in his post-apocalyptic world, there are no central governments. There are no big governments to issue currency. But there is this barter coin mint, which is controlled by some entity. And there are silver mines which mine the silver, which then send it to the barter mint where these coins are minted. And they're accepted as legal tender throughout this region with all of these decentralized governments where basically each town has its own little government. So that's a fascinating concept. The whole society trusts these barter coins, which then becomes a very interesting plot point in your world. Why do they trust these coins? What happens if they stop trusting it? What happens if people start debasing these coins? Will the barter mint send out, a posse to round up the people who are debasing these coins and throw them in jail or shoot them, given the brutality of the post-apocalyptic worldscape? So when you're designing your currency system, think about those kinds of concepts. Money is based on trust. Why does your society trust your money? And that leads us very nicely into symbolism. So currently, and please, I'm not commenting on whether this is the right thing or the wrong thing to do. I'm just saying that currently the United States is discussing replacing their $20 note. And it's interesting that this discussion exists because it means that even in today's day and age, where most of our money is digital and we spend money based on our credit cards and our value in a bank account, we still understand the importance of symbolism in money. Now that's fascinating. So if you look at this throughout the ages, you'll see that when we started minting coins, we very soon started putting the issuing authority, the king or queen's face on those coins, right? Now, that was as a stamp of their imperium, if you will, of their authority. It was also a source of national pride to some extent, that you could mint your own coins. And that is really interestingly used by Jacqueline Carey in her books, which is set in a historical fantasy concept. If you have not read those books, if you have not read Jacqueline Carey's Kashul books, the first trilogy, and you want to read them, this section contains a huge spoiler. Go ahead and skip on to the next chapter. Okay, you have been warned. Okay, here it comes. So what she does is the main character Phaedra visits Illyria, where she learns that the minting of coins has been forbidden. They're a conquered nation, and they're not allowed to mint their own coins with their own leader's face on them. Then when they are returning to her home kingdom, there's a threat of civil war hanging over them. And when they go into their kingdom, the soldiers inside their kingdom have been told that the queen, that Phaedra, the main character, is accompanying, is a fake queen and the real queen is actually dead. And how they combat this is they use the coins that have been newly minted with Ysandra, with the queen's face on it, and they throw it at the soldiers. They throw coins at the soldiers who are opposing them, giving them that momentary pause of comparing the profile on the coin with the person they're seeing in front of them. And they diffuse the civil war situation using the symbolism of money. It was so well done. It was so well signposted in showing the Illyrian coin not being minted, and then the payoff at the end where they use these newly minted coins to show that it is the real queen, to combat the fake news of her death. So well done. Okay, that's symbolism, national pride, and money. Before I delve into the 5 questions you should ask yourself when designing your own coin, I just want to cover that it doesn't have to be a coin. Yeah? I know I've been talking about coinage, and the tradition in fantasy is to use coins as money, but it doesn't have to be that way. The Song dynasty invented paper money in the 11th century in China. It was an IOU, and that basically said you're entitled to this much gold from the treasury. But it doesn't even have to be that. As we discussed, money is about trust. That's why, like, our paper money is based on nothing but trust. Our digital money is based on nothing but trust. So you don't have to be tied to coins. It is just a traditional trope to do so. We've had paper money for a very long time. Okay, let's move on to those 5 questions for designing your own currency system. 1. What is currency? Are you going to use paper money? Are you going to use coins? Are you going to use something else? My only advice here is to stay away from things that can't be easily divided, and to stay away from things that are common in your world. So, I mean, we moved away from seashells because everybody can pick up seashells. We moved away from whale teeth because they're hard to divide. Move to something which can be issued by some sort of central authority, which brings us on to question number 2, which is, why do people trust the currency? Why do they trust that they'll be able to spend the currency? Okay? So that generally ties into them trusting the central issuing authority of the currency. So who is that issuing authority, and why would they trust it? 3, what is the symbolism of your currency? Is there a symbolism in the numbers? Maybe your currency base is based around how many gods there are in your pantheon. So if there's 12 gods, your currency might have a base of 12. Maybe it's a symbolism about whose face gets to be on the coin. Maybe it's about what your coins are called, or what your various denominations are called. On an aside here, please don't be lazy with your denomination names. Don't call them things like gold, silver, copper. Call them by good names like pennies, or dimes, or shields. Make up some good denominational name for your currencies. Question number 4, what is monetary crime? Is it a crime to make a different coin? Is it a crime to mine the base metal of a coin? Is it a crime to fake a paper note? And if those things are crimes, what is going to happen to you? Who enforces those crimes? Is it the central issuing authority? Like, how does that work? How does money crime work? And then your last question that you should ask in a fantasy setting specifically is, what is the impact of magic? Now, the impact of magic can be 0. Yeah? Magic can have no impact on your currency system, but it could have a big impact on your currency system. A example of this comes again from Harry Potter, who really does a good job in this world. Spells that try and imitate magic break down. The only thing that can replicate gold is the Philosopher's Stone. So these are interesting concepts. Why do spells around money break down? Is something intrinsically in the money? Is there some kind of protection on the money? Is there a way around it? Does that form part of your money crime? So those are good questions to ask yourself in a fantasy setting. How do you handle magic and money? Yeah, so those are your 5 questions. What is currency? Why do people trust currency? What is the symbolism of the currency? What is a crime around the currency? And what is the impact of magic? And that is my take for designing a currency system for a fantasy world, and I will see you on Friday for another episode of Just in Time World.